Having looked briefly at mammals in the last chapter, this time we'll focus in more tightly on primates, the mammals most closely related to human beings. This begins our examination of primatology, the study of non-human primates, which will continue next chapter. Let's start by reviewing the standard taxonomy for humans to see where we fall. Humans and all of these other species fall under the animal kingdom. If we exclude invertebrates like worms and insects, we reach the phylum of vertebrates. Humans, dogs, and so forth are all in the class of mammals. Monkeys, chimps, and humans all belong to the order of primates. This is the topic of this and the next lecture, but let's keep drilling down into the primates. Humans, chimps, gorillas, etc. belong to the family of great apes. Within that family, humans belong to the genus Homo, and finally, the species sapiens, so that humans are known scientifically as Homo sapiens. Now, let's step back up to the order of Primates and see why humans are categorized there. Primates is the Latin name for the order of mammals that includes lemurs, lorises, tarsiers, monkeys, and apes, and humans because humans are a kind of ape, but primatology typically is focused on non-human primates. It's an accident of language that the singular Latin word primates is spelled the same as the plural English word primates, but when using the formal Latin name, it is appropriate to say that primates is an order, not primates are an order. At any rate, humans belong to this order, and that's why primates holds a special place in the study of physical anthropology. We share biological traits, both derived and ancestral, with other non-human primates. Studying them and their biology can help us to understand our own. It's often hard to see relationships when looking at oneself, but looking at the same relationships in something else makes them easier to recognize. A theory that explains non-human primates might also work to explain humans. So all the primates belong to one mammalian order. That means, according to the ideas we explored in the last chapter, that they must share certain homologies, shared derived traits, that set them off from other mammals. What are they? Well, unfortunately, primates are a very diverse order, and there is really very little that all species within it share. Remember, evolution can create new characteristics or eliminate old ones as the environment changes. And since primates today live in a wide variety of environments, they have a whole range of adaptations. Also, primates tend to be quite generalized, meaning that individual species are adapted to a variety of environments. Since generalized traits are often ancestral, these traits may also be shared with other orders of mammals. Nevertheless, there are traits that are common to most primates, and if we encounter a species with most of them, it's a safe bet that we're looking at a primate. First, primates have a tendency toward erect posture. That is, primates often hold their spines in a vertical orientation. This may seem a little weird to single out as a shared characteristic, but other orders of mammals almost never do that. Most quadrupeds, for example, hold their spines horizontally pretty much all of the time. But when primates are at rest, they often have their spines vertical, with their forelimbs completely off the ground. We humans even walk with our spines vertical. Primates have a flexible, generalized limb structure. Imagine the range of motion that a dog's limbs have, and compare that to a monkey swinging through the trees. Primate limbs can move in almost any direction independently of one another. Primates have prehensile hands, meaning they're able to grab and manipulate things. This is made possible by a variety of generalized adaptations. There are 5 digits on each hand. Primates have opposable thumbs, which means that the thumb points in a different direction than the fingers, and it can be bent to touch the tips of the other fingers. Primates have fingernails instead of claws, which would get in the way of fine manipulation. And finally, less obviously, primates have tactile pads at the end of their digits that increase their sense of touch. Primates are also omnivorous. They eat a wide variety of foods, coupled with a generalized dentition that makes omnivory possible. One thing that separates primates from most other mammals is a heavy reliance on vision instead of olfaction, or the sense of smell, as their primary sense. This derives from primates' use of first, a deeper, richer form of color vision than many other mammals have. Primates' depth perception due to binocular vision, that is, eyes placed around in the front of the head. Brain forms and structures that send visual information to both sides of the brain, and specialized brain structures that analyze that visual information into 3 dimensions. Several other common primate traits include a general expansion and increased complexity to the brain, especially in the neocortex, an increased reliance on learned behaviors, living in social groups, and finally, a tendency to be diurnal, that is, active during the daytime. So again, most of these traits are not universal to all primates, and those that are often shared with other mammals. So none of these traits alone is enough to say with certainty that an animal is a primate or not, but any species with most of them is very likely to be a primate. So why have these traits evolved in order Primates? To a greater or lesser degree, all of these characteristics are adaptations to an arboreal lifestyle. That is, all primates are evolved generally for life in trees. This is in contrast to most other mammals, which lead a terrestrial or ground-based lifestyle. This may seem surprising because, aside from occasionally as children, most humans don't climb trees that often. In fact, most of us aren't particularly good at it. So how can we be evolved for arboreal life? Well, the characteristics we have that make us not particularly good at climbing trees are derived traits, because our ancestors left the trees several million years ago. But our more ancestral traits, like opposable thumbs, still help out a lot for climbing trees when we do it. Depth perception is similarly essential for arboreal life because climbing involves judging distances accurately, and a flexible limb structure allows movement in 3 dimensions. In fact, most primates still do spend most of their time in trees, and the list of characteristics makes a lot of sense when you consider the requirements for living there. So primates in general are evolved for arboreal life, except for a few weirdos like us who've moved on to other niches. But primates don't live in just any trees. They're only really found in tropical and semi-tropical forests around the equatorial regions of the planet. You don't see them naturally in northern or southern temperate forests like around here, except again for us. All primates have a basically tropical physiology, and they don't do very well in cold environments. How do we survive in northern winters then? Culture. For the most part, we don't change our physiology to fit the environment, though some of that has occurred, and we'll talk about it toward the end of the course. For the most part, we change the environment to better fit our physiology. Clothing, structures, fire, all of them provide a warm, tropical microenvironment immediately around our tropical bodies. Other primates don't have those cultural adaptations, so they're restricted to environments that are naturally warm. But back to trees. Moving around in trees is actually pretty dangerous. Terrestrial animals don't generally have to worry about the ground suddenly not being there, but primates do. Branches could break, or they could be just out of reach, or just a careless step could cause you to slip and fall. For a terrestrial species, that's a foot or two usually. For primates, it could be dozens of feet and fatal. So primate locomotion, methods of moving around, is pretty highly developed. Most primates practice a generalized locomotion strategy, just whatever works, but they emphasize one mode over others. Many are still basically quadrupedal. After all, if moving is dangerous, it's best to have as many feet in contact with the tree as possible. Some primates, like some lemurs and tarsiers, are vertical clingers and leapers. They will wrap long, flexible hands and feet around the vertical trunks of trees and crawl up and down. When they need to move horizontally, they push off with their legs and leap to another vertical trunk. Some species, especially gibbons, brachiate. That is, they hang below branches and swing arm over arm. They have special adaptations in their hands and arms to do this efficiently. Most terrestrial primates are quadrupeds, like most other mammals. Baboons walk on all 4 feet habitually. However, some apes, like chimps and gorillas, have evolved knuckle walking, quadrupedal movement where the weight is carried on the knuckles of the forelimbs instead of the palms. This allows these apes to walk quadrupedally while still carrying something in their hands, which gives them an advantage in tool use. We'll examine that more closely in the next chapter. And your textbook skipped one of the more important modes of primate locomotion, at least for our purposes, and that is bipedalism. Moving around on only 2 feet. Hominins are the only habitually bipedal primates. We will talk about bipedalism quite a bit in the next unit. Let's spend the rest of this lecture looking at the different kinds of primates around the world and how they relate to one another. This chart is located on page 133 of your textbook. It's a taxonomy of the primates with the different levels of categorization on the left, from the largest categories at the top to the smallest at the bottom. Branching lines indicate when one category is subdivided into smaller categories. The best way to understand this chart is to remember that these taxa reflect evolutionary relatedness. So each category represents a clade, or all the species descended from a single ancestral species. Each time an ancestor gave rise to 2 descendant species, the line branches. Since this is a physical anthropology class, we'll look at this chart from the human perspective. Humans are at the lower right corner. If we trace a line from humans to any other species, we go up from the humans to a higher level, then back down to the target species. The point at which we turn around is the smallest clade to which humans and the target both belong. That's the clade formed by the most recent common ancestor shared by humans and the target. So the farther up we have to go to get to the target, the more distantly related we are. If you look carefully at the chart, you'll see that there are 6 points at which we can turn back down. Every other primate can be reached by going up from humans to one of those 6 branching points, then taking the other branch downward. So if you can remember which categories are on each side of those 6 points, you can reconstruct this entire chart. So let's look at each of those branching points. The first branching point separates the branch containing humans from the one with those primates most distantly related to humans. These are lemurs and lorises. Lemurs are found only on Madagascar, and lorises are found around the entire circumference of the Indian Ocean. As one might expect for such distant relatives, there's not much of a family resemblance, but we can see some shared traits: binocular vision, fingernails, opposable thumbs, etc. At the second branching point, we find the next most distantly related species are the tarsiers. These are found in Southeast Asia. They used to be classified with lemurs and lorises on the other side of branch 1, and that category was called prosimians, meaning first primates. However, genetic research in the last few decades has shown that tarsiers are actually more closely related to us than lemurs or lorises. They've just become highly specialized. Tarsiers are nocturnal, and the adaptations they've made to living in the dark, especially their huge eyes, make them seem to have little in common with other primates. All primates that are not lemurs, lorises, or tarsiers are called anthropoids. Anthropoids are monkeys and apes, and humans, since we're classified as a kind of ape. Within that category of anthropoids, New World monkeys split off from our lineage first at the third branching point. The early anthropoid ancestors of New World monkeys got isolated in South America and evolved separately from their Old World cousins in Africa. There, Old World monkeys and apes continued to evolve together for a time, then split at the fourth branching point. The Latin name for apes is hominoid. The word hominoid means like a person, and by this point in our evolutionary family tree, there is a definite family resemblance among all apes. The major visible characteristic that sets apes off from all other primates is the absence of a tail. If it has a tail, it is not an ape, period. Every species of primate that isn't an ape has a tail, period. Aside from that, apes tend also to have a variety of other adaptations that generally are more human-like, the most important of which is greater encephalization, that is, larger brains for a given body size. The first split in the hominoid family tree comes at branching point 5. It was between the lesser apes, or the gibbons, and the great apes. This is a distinction largely about body size. Gibbons, found in southern Asia, are roughly the same size as large monkeys, just without tails. They're also habitual brachiators, as well as having several other unique adaptations, but their size is really the most defining trait among apes. The other apes all have generally much larger body sizes, which is why they're called great apes. The great apes, including us, are classified as hominids. Note the difference between hominoid and hominid, and coming up hominin. Sorry, but evolutionary biologists are just not too creative. At this point, we could continue looking at branching points, but frankly, there's not space on our chart. Instead, let's just look at the 5 living species of great ape one at a time. The orangutan is the species of great ape most distantly related to humans. Orangutans live in Indonesia, and the word means wise man of the forest. And looking at an adult orang, you can really start to think that it's some weird, hairy kind of person. Unlike other apes, orangs tend to be solitary animals most of the time. They show a high degree of sexual dimorphism and unique bright red coloring, probably as adaptations for spotting and recognizing mates at a distance in the dense forest. Social animals have less need to stand out from the dark forest background because they encounter one another at much shorter distances. Closer to humans than orangutans are the gorillas. Gorillas are restricted to Central Africa and are the largest surviving apes. Males can weigh up to 400 pounds, though females are substantially smaller. They tend to live in groups with one dominant adult male, called a silverback because of his coloring, several adult females, and their offspring. When the young grow to adulthood, they usually leave the group and join another. This, as it happens, is almost exactly the structure of the polygynous households found in many human societies. So again, we're starting to see something of ourselves in the apes. The remaining 2 species of non-human great apes, chimpanzees and bonobos, are more closely related to one another than either is to other great ape species. Thus, they form an even smaller clade within the great apes, the genus Pan. This is the only genus of great ape with 2 species assigned to it. Chimps are probably the most familiar of the apes, if only because of their use in Hollywood. They also seem to be the most human-like apes, besides bona fide humans, that is. Chimps seem to have, to a lesser degree, most traits that we see in ourselves: culture, personal bonds like friendship, large societies, and even some traits we'd rather not admit to, like aggression and the holding of grudges. We'll talk more about chimp social behavior next time. Many interpretations of the behaviors of early hominins are based on analogies with modern chimps because early hominins had so recently shared a common ancestor with chimps. And then finally, there are bonobos, which used to be called pygmy chimps. That name is no longer considered appropriate, but it rightly suggests that bonobos are slightly smaller than chimps and more thinly built. While they don't show quite as many human-like behaviors as chimps, they show others that chimps lack, like especially having sex for fun. In other primate species, sexual activity is mating activity, but among bonobos and humans, sex performs a variety of social and emotional functions as well. This is one reason that primatology can be really useful in understanding humans. The last category of apes are the hominins. The only surviving species of hominin is Homo sapiens, us. We'll spend the next unit looking in detail at hominin evolution and all the different paleospecies that paleoanthropologists have identified as belonging to our particular branch of the evolutionary tree. But before we get to Unit 3, there's one more chapter to cover in this unit. Next time, we'll examine how primates behave in the wild and think about what those behaviors can tell us about ourselves.